Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 157.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
All right, gentlemen. I'm sitting in the captain's chair again this month. I tell you what, I am worn out after this episode. I have done all kinds of stuff this month for these episodes. I need a nap.
You know, like studied and everything.
I know. I took notes last night before we started recording.
Ain't that awesome? That's just totally... I'm just totally...
I'm taking the rest of the year off.
No.
So, today is Pop Culture. We're bringing you this episode from Studio R here at the Atrium, overlooking the vast expanse of my backyard, which really is just the woods behind the house. But it sounds better when I say the vast expanse of my yard. And what I want to talk about today, this is another case where I get to choose the episode. We usually talk about how the rest of us are indulging one of them too. But today we're indulging me.
That's cool.
And this one is about George Perez. And George Perez is one of the iconic comic book artists of our teen years, early adult years, and into later adult. I mean, he's just one of the kings of the Bronze Age. And now what they call the Copper Age, and I don't know what modern stuff is called.
Define Bronze Age for us.
So, Golden Age is from the beginning up to about the mid-50s.
Right. Golden Age comics are kind of a certain, very much rah-rah, American way, Captain America time.
Well, by the time you get to the mid-50s, there's lots of horror. Actually, superheroes aren't as big.
Right.
Yeah, they wane very quickly after the war.
Yeah.
Certain ones stick around, but there was tons in the early times.
It was mostly the DC characters that continued unabated. Although Captain America's book continued through the 50s, but it got really strange at the end.
Right.
So, but anyways, then with 1956, you start the Silver Age. And that's with the appearance of the Flash, the new Flash.
Yeah, Barry
in
Allen.
Showcase number 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then from then up until about 1970, I count the end of the Silver Age as when Kirby leaves Marvel for DC.
Yeah. But the tail end of the Silver Age is the introduction by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, of all of the big Marvel heroes.
Well, actually,
These are all starting about 62?
61, end of 61, beginning of 62. So it's just a few years after the beginning when Marvel starts to dominate the Silver Age.
Right. And so there's grades of difference between those mid-50s Superman and Batman stories and the Denny O'Neil Batmans at you could say the beginning of the Bronze Age, you could say the end of the Silver Age.
I think it's still the end of the Silver Age.
Yeah, based on your criteria, yes, it is. It's late 60s.
It's an early precursor to what happens in the rest of
that's right.
From the 70s on.
That's right. It's the outlier that proves the rule because that template they set becomes the Bronze Age.
What it is it's a new generation.
That's right.
What I think best defines the Bronze Age is not just Kirby leaving Marvel for DC.
It's a convenient break point.
It's a convenient breaking point. But also, Kirby leaving DC is also one of the leaving Marvel for DC is also one of the things that accelerates what helps define the Bronze Age, and that's the explosion of new talent.
Right.
Because if you don't have Kirby doing 9 out of 10 things at Marvel, you got to find somebody else to do.
You got to hire guys,
or
take guys doing small stuff. Yeah.
Right, and this had already started. They had brought on Gene Colan and John Buscema, John Romita. Some of the really big names. Some of the guys who were early on, Dick Ayers, he was still doing stuff, but those are guys that had actually been around for a while.
Right. But many of those are waning by the time this is going on.
By the time you get deep into the into the 70s, they are working less and less as full time, which is a shame for some of them because some of them really. Although John Buscema, he did Conan up through. I don't know. I think into the early 80s.
He may have gone all the way until Marvel lost the rights, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he did that or not.
Pretty sure, because Conan had so many different books, and Buscema loved doing them. He absolutely loved doing them. He could do them almost in his sleep, and the art never really suffered. It really didn't. Especially when Roy Thomas was writing him, those two were just fantastic on that book, and not just that book, but several others.
They were a good pair. So. But a lot of the new guys that were brought on, the art was expanded to these other guys as Marvel had the opportunity to add books.
Right, because they're expanding their
right,
books
well, they got a new
because they're having some success with these characters.
Well, more importantly, what really starts expanding it is when they finally get a different distributor than the one that does DC. Because they had been limited to the number of books they could publish by DC because they were basically using DC's distribution channel.
Yeah.
And once they finally get out from under that contract, that's when things start to explode.
And you can even pick the month. I don't remember which one it is.
Yeah, you can. Because you see they go from 12 comics to 50 to like 25 or 30. It's just
and many of their characters were in double forms. They had like 3 or 4 books.
Yes.
That they had stolen the old horror title name from,
yeah,
and gave them double billing for
Tales of Suspense,
Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales, and I know there's another that I'm gonna.
But by the mid
and they canceled all those
70s,
books and bring all those characters into their doubling the line for those into their own books.
Yeah.
Most of which survive, but not all. Nick Fury and Doctor Strange are given about 15 issues, and then they're canceled.
Doctor Strange is one of those ones that comes in and out constantly.
He does, and Nick Fury kind of does too, because
not as often.
That's correct. He's not quite as popular, actually. The big buzz of Jim Steranko, who took over that book during the transition from Strange Tales over, he doesn't stick around but 4 issues.
Right.
And after that, they've got this character in this book, this regular one. And I know they tried. They brought in Barry Smith was doing a lot of them. He did a number 12 with that, which was pretty cool.
Right. Well, this is what I want to talk about.
All right. This is the genesis that brings what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean the point being that they're having some success in the '60s, and now you hit 1970, and they're in a position to capitalize on that success. And expand the number of books, and they need more artists.
That's right.
So now there's this new younger generation.
Right. So they're hiring a bunch of young artists, young writers, and the same thing's going on at DC because the old hands who had stuck it out were really the ones who were still in the business. They weren't really bringing out a whole lot of new guys until this, as I understand it. I mean, there's always going to be some, I'm sure, but nobody at that time went into comics because it was a good career, unfortunately. Because a lot of the comic guys, they wanted to get into commercial art.
But in the end, some of them really loved it, though. Yeah, some of them really loved it.
So you start seeing new guys. One of the first ones that you see, and he really is with Denny O'Neil in the '60s. Is probably the precursor to this. Which is Neil Adams.
That's right.
Neil Adams is the first hyper-realist in comic art, and just about everybody that came after him tried to copy his style. Mm-hmm. John Byrne has for years admitted that I've been trying to ape Neil Adams my entire career. And then when he finally got to the point where he felt comfortable with actually trying to be John Byrne instead of Neil Adams, his art, I think, really got even better. Because he admits, this is the point where I started trying to be myself, and things took off. And so Neil Adams is kind of the first. And then the other 3 that I like to talk about, you've got Walt Simonson, who really becomes more famous in the 80s, but he did some phenomenal, groundbreaking stuff in the 70s as well, like The Manhunter.
Absolutely.
With Archie Goodwin. And then, of course, John Byrne and George Perez. Usually you think of those 2 together because they came about at Marvel about the same time.
And they were both doing the headlining team books around that
Surprisingly,
time.
well, X-Men was not a headline book.
Exactly. That's it. It became that.
It became that. So both of them. And again, I want to deal with George Perez mainly because George is he's sick. He's got pancreatic cancer, and he was told just a couple of months ago that he probably has 6 to 12 months to live. And it's entirely possible by the time this episode airs that he's gone already.
Right.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But that's where
it's what prompted us to say, let's do this now.
Right. And George is also representative. He's probably the best known of the group, but he's also representative of a lot of minority artists and writers who come on board at this time that, as a kid, I never really thought much of it because, I didn't automatically associate, just because there weren't a whole lot of Hispanics in the areas I grew up. So I don't automatically think as a kid, Perez is somebody who's a native Spanish speaker, comes from Hispanic. It's just not my experience at the time.
Well, you can't tell what a person even looks like
right.
by their art.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you see a lot of that. There's some guys from the Philippines, Alfred Alcala.
Ernie Chan is another one.
And Dennis Cowan, black artist.
Very much so, yeah.
There's several of these guys that are hired on, and they bring different style, different energy. And in some ways, they break the house look at Marvel. Mm-hmm. Some of the guys. But now, Byrne and Perez, they probably do the better job of keeping the house look. Partially that's because who inks them, depending on what title they're on.
Right.
Partially it's just because they're very faithful to the characters that have been given to them as far as how they portray them. Not that the other guys aren't, but those guys also aren't given some of the higher profile books.
Yeah, some of those guys, like Alfredo Alcala, did a lot of Conan and Sword and Sorcery, which in the 70s was, because of the success of Conan, there was tons and tons of let's replicate this again. Most of those didn't succeed.
Right.
But
Slayer.
Yeah, exactly. And the DC implosion was part of that. I mean, Mike Grell's Warlord was about the only one to come out of there and survive for any length of time. But nevertheless, these artists were given opportunities in varying other things. Savage Sword of Conan's a great one because you have a lot of these guys because they can draw black and white and they're very good at it. They're very detailed at that. So they give them these type of jobs. And next thing you know, they're filling in. Ernie Chan, who went by Ernie Chua for a while, he was at DC also doing a Batman book. I mean,
yes, that's right.
And he was doing Justice League covers around this time, and he did a lot of work for them. And that's pretty high profile stuff because that cover is what sells the book in many ways.
Right. So this is an interesting time when the industry transitions to a much more diverse workplace. Mm-hmm. Still not as diverse as it is now. There's honestly, when you see the artists and the writers that are being promoted now, it's almost all some kind of minority. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just pointing out that that's the point where it's gotten to where I don't know if it's just
it's a field that is of interest and is more open than it has ever been.
Yes, far more open than it has ever been.
And people want this.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was like, I'm an artist. Well, I can get work here. Let's do that.
As long as you're good, I don't care what you look like.
Well, that's right.
There's a lot of really good art out there. There's also a lot of really bad art.
I was going to say.
But there's still a lot of good. So Perez is probably the best known example of one of these minorities that have taken the comic world by storm. And he's known as just a really great guy. He's got one of the best reputations to this day. Always loved to do conventions, always a smile, great relationship with the fans, always willing to have his picture taken with a pretty girl. If you go on Facebook to Perez groups and you see pictures of him, it's always with one or two really hot cosplayers cosplaying one of his characters. And he's always got this big ass grin on his face. And I always wonder what his wife Carol thought about those, but she obviously didn't mind because he's been married to her for like 40 years. Yeah. They've been together forever. It's his only wife. They have no kids. Not sure why. Never really talked about. But they have no kids. And, he's been in the business since the early 70s. Mm-hmm. He did Creatures on the Loose early. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that's before he picks up the Avengers. And I honestly have to look up to see all the books they did, but I know that's probably the most famous one because that's Manwolf.
Right.
That he was early on. And surprisingly, he's given the Avengers with issue 141.
Right. And this is before he's given the Fantastic Four,
This is before he touches the Fantastic Four.
That's right, and I had forgotten what order those worked in, because...
Now, he was an assistant to Rich Buckler, and that's how he got his foot in the door.
Oh, okay, because Rich Buckler was the artist of the Fantastic Four, right? First it's Kirby, then it's John Buscema, and...
Romita, then Buscema.
But that Romita was quick, though.
He was on there for quite a few issues, yeah. But I mean, it wasn't... Because the FF is still one of the flagship titles. Yes.
Buckler has taken over that successfully, and is doing... I liked Buckler's art. I really did.
Well, Joe Sinnott giving it the house look, that Kirby-ish look. Really, it's the Sinnott look. That really has a lot to do with that.
Correct.
It keeps the style the same.
Very much so. But Perez was different even with that, though.
Well, it's the detail.
That's exactly right.
But he's this young guy, though, and he's given the Avengers. He's never done a big team book before, but somehow he's talked them into or they've decided to give it to him.
Yeah.
And it really is the first place where with his first opportunity, he shines with a team book. Mm-hmm. He's known as the team book artist. Yeah. He juggles all those characters better than anybody.
At a crucial point for this title as well. It's hitting its stride, and some of the most famous stories are coming under his...
They're coming up.
Under his art.
Yeah. I don't know that you could say it's hitting its stride at this book. 'Cause, I mean, it's you're talking about over 10 years now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean,
you had the transformation where Cap is brought into the stories, and
that's very early.
That's very early, yeah. So, but it's at a place where there are a ton of fans of this book, and like you said, it is a flagship book.
It has waned in many respects at the sales at the time. This is around the time of the Swordsman, the Celestial Madonna.
It's right after that.
It's right after that's when he comes in, and it needs a refresh. And they've kind of, they've let the Vision and the Scarlet Witch get married, which was not an easy thing to make happen, by the way, but they did. And that had been laid down, and kind of he's handed this plate of... It's not been this. I think the Swordsman and the Celestial Madonna business. I forget who the artists were. It just wasn't selling.
Sal Buscema
was
on that, I think.
And there were a few other things that it just didn't.
Actually, Don Heck was on a lot of those.
That's exactly right. And who had been an Avengers artist early on too, but for whatever reason, the book needed some life. Yeah. And they picked the right guy at the right time that needed it.
Again, he revitalizes it, and
it's a fresh look.
The art's tremendous. Like I said, it's moving towards this kind of a realism.
Mm-hmm. And now, the interesting thing about it is that the first thing he's asked to do is to create the looks for the Justice League, or the Marvel version of the Justice League, which is the Squadron Supreme, or the Squadron Sinister, depending on... Mm-hmm. Actually, some of that was already done. Right. Come to think, because that was done before this.
It was, but nevertheless, he still...
But he took it as far... he took it even farther. Yeah. And I think he adjusted some of the characters and costumes as well. So you've got two large super teams that he's dealing with. And he's just filling the page with detail. I remember one panel where, it might not have been the Avengers, it might have been the Fantastic Four, where he's filling the background with just crosshatches. And it's like, dude, you don't need to do that. That's just more work for the inker. I'm surprised the inker didn't just, erase it, because why do you need it? And so, he's bringing that to it, and he draws in a style that is polished. And it's not that the artists who came before him were not polished, but it's taking it to the next level. It's like...
There's a lot of depth to the panels.
Yeah. And he fits a lot in each of these panels. Now, if you look at a comic from this era, early, mid-70s, there's 6, 8, 9, 10 panels sometimes. Whereas nowadays, that's like 5 pages worth of panels.
Yeah.
And so, the amount of time that it would take him to do those pages was actually kind of detrimental, because he had a hard time doing a full book every single month.
Right, and he kind of got... in both of those books, he would have to have either fill-ins or reprints as they went along.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, he'd get further and further behind. Well, we got to fix it. Fix it. Which is kind of where that ended up. But people still, would buy that book. And a lot of it was because those books were him.
Yeah.
He became that.
So he's the artist on some of the greatest. Avengers stuff.
Right.
In his first and second run there, because the 140s, he did a few in the 150s, then came back for several in the 160s, which when I first started reading the Avengers was right around 159, which is Graviton. And
which he did. Yeah.
No, he did not do 159.
No, that was Sal Buscema.
Sal Buscema.
That's right.
And then he picks up with 161, which is where Ultron comes back.
Yes.
And that's just phenomenal stuff. And I was just enraptured by this.
Right. And it's tremendous. Those Ultron stories from 160s to 170s are tremendous stories.
Yes.
And he's working in an era of these Avengers stories are some of the ones that then get kind of transformed into the films. To a degree, I mean, the Collector, that era.
Yeah, well,
and the
stuff that he worked on. I mean, those concepts originated before him, but a lot of the stuff that some of the looks you'll see sometimes come from him. It just kind of depends on what they decide to pull out of it.
Yeah.
The whole thing with well, actually, the stuff in the films comes more from some of his later stuff, like the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yes, that's later. But
that
Thanos is a character that goes to this era as well,
but doesn't appear in the Avengers. He was an Iron Man and Captain Marvel Warlock villain.
Well, there is the Avengers Annual, though.
Yes, that's true.
But it's
that's a crossover.
Yeah, it is, but it's
it's tied to the Collector. Thanos, I think, appears in the Michael saga a little bit.
No. Nope.
Oh, it's not one of the characters that takes notice of the Michael saga?
I do not think so.
Okay.
Doctor Strange does. Silver Surfer does. But
the Watchers.
Yeah, but I don't think Thanos does.
Somehow or another, that's my first introduction to Thanos. It's somewhere in that run. I can't remember. But basically,
that's probably the Annual.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah,
but it's this set of stories that include these Count Nefaria.
No, that's John Byrne.
I know those three.
But it's the same era.
It's the same era. Yeah,
same
but
era.
It's different.
And then again, the Michael saga, which is not a ton of Perez, but there's a couple of Perez.
Yeah, he does the setups for it, and then he's moved on. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing at that point because I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. But kind of about in the 180s, he's taking a break.
I think by then he has probably moved on to. He might even be at DC by then.
Yeah.
Although I don't think so. I think that's still 70s. I don't think he's at DC until about 1980. But he's off doing something else.
Yeah, it would be 78, 79 is all the way through.
He's probably doing Marvel 2-in-1 because he did a bunch of Marvel 2-in-1 with the Thing.
Because even though the One to Gore stuff is still
Byrne.
Yeah, that's still in the 70s, I think.
But he comes
180s.
He does come back in the late
1970s. I'm sorry.
Right.
Oh yeah.
The 190s. 194.
Oh, yes.
And he runs through 200.
Yes. After Byrne, he does about the next 10 issues, 10, 12 issues.
That's right. And many of those were very, very good.
Yes, that's just some fantastic stuff. Very creative visually as always.
But he's doing the Fantastic Four about that time.
He had done some.
200.
He had he actually I don't know that he did a whole lot in the 90s, the 190s. I don't think he did any in the 200s. Matter of fact, I don't know that he ever came back to the Fantastic Four.
No, his last cover was 194 with Diablo, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
No. Excuse me, 197 with the return of Reed Richards' powers. That was his last.
Yes, that's a Perez.
That was Perez cover. That's Keith Pollard inside, but that's the last one that he did.
Yeah.
And after that, they had I forget who did 198 and 199.
Kirby did 200.
Kirby did 200, and then it's kind of like, okay, we've pushed the reset button. Let's start over.
Yeah.
And they brought them back and just kind of went that way.
So, the thing that caught my eye early on about Perez is, one, how gorgeous the art looked.
Yeah.
But two, you could follow the story by looking at the pictures. I call the Bronze Age, especially with these four that I mentioned, Simonson, Adams, Byrne, and Perez, they are visual storytellers. And I told this to Byrne once. I met him at a convention, and I had mentioned how I thought he was doing some of the best work in the industry, and he started to poo-poo it because he does not suffer sycophants. And I said, no, let me explain. Your storytelling is what I'm talking about. And then he started taking me seriously because I was making a thoughtful comment, not just blowing smoke up his rear end. But I meant it though. His style of storytelling, his ability to tell a story, it was just it's some of the most phenomenal work I keep using phenomenal, but it's unparalleled in many ways. How good all of these guys are at putting together an image that is so complete and detailed, yet contains just what is necessary. The details help set the tone, but they don't overpower. And the visual designs from all of these guys are just great. I mean, you look at Simonson on Thor, and the visual designs there are just incredible. just stuff that nobody had seen before. And he, same thing when he was at DC doing Manhunter. That was just some amazing stuff because it had not been seen before. All these guys were breaking the mold from what had come before. Now, you could argue guys like Rich Buckler is probably owed a lot of that because he also is a great storyteller. And probably Perez learned a lot from him, having assisted him, worked with him. And, probably Perez ghosted a lot of those early pages because that was not uncommon when guys had studios and assistants, which is fine. I'm sure Perez got paid for what he did, which is good. But eventually, the work with Marvel sours because it was so difficult for him to keep up the deadlines. Sometimes, he had health issues even prior to what he has now, and he had, for whatever reason, he couldn't always meet the schedule. Now, there were times when he met schedules. By the time he got to DC and did New Teen Titans with Marv Wolfman, he had done over 50 straight issues of that.
That's 4 years.
And at one point, he was actually doing 2 books in a month because when they did the direct only title, they set that 12 issues ahead of the regular title and did another year's worth of stories there. And then when they got to the end of those, they were reprinting the direct only book. So it would appear on the newsstand a year later. This is when we had comics appearing on newsstands, not just in specialty shops.
Right.
So when we get there, we see him really take off with the creativity in designing new characters and taking on old villains and breathing new life into them. And just, one of the things I remember from seeing him on the first issue of the Teen Titans that I read, which I think was 19 or 20, was this thing where Wally, Kid Flash, is tied up, and he's got his hands behind him, and you see he's vibrating his fingers to send this sonic boom back towards the tower. And the detail on the fingers, on the gloves, with the seams and the little wrinkles that you see on gloves, when you look at them where it's sewed, it really just caught my eye.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that I looked at and I could just look at all day long. And he really started to shine there. He had also done Justice League, I think, before he did New Teen Titans. That's what he went over there and did after I think Dick Dillon had passed.
He had, that's correct.
And that's why that had opened up, because Dick Dillon was the artist on Justice League forever.
Very much so, yes. And and kind of from the, and I forget where Dick Dillon dies around issue 190 or so.
Actually, I think it's before that.
Before that, it's 180s, 185, 104. But he'd done it since like the issue 90. He's done
Actually, I think it's more than that because
it's much more than that.
Except that he had some fill-ins. If you discount the fill-ins, his first issue to his last issue was more than Kirby's run on Fantastic Four. So it was well over. I mean, it was significantly more. But Kirby did 102 issues straight, whereas Dillon did not. He had some fill-ins, which is fine. But so that was his big opportunity there. Again, a team book.
Yeah,
that's what he does. He really just shines on the team books. And he juggles these characters so well. And then eventually he gets to do Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Ah, yes. In many respects, one of his masterpieces.
Yes, it is one of the masterpieces. Literally hundreds and hundreds of characters. And there's one wraparound cover that literally has well over 100 characters on it. And, they all look different. And it's not like some guys who can't draw feet, Rob Liefeld, and he hides those. He draws everything well, and he's a great draftsman. His craft, that's the thing I admire. He's so good at what he does, so polished. Even early on, even though he was doing that crosshatch stuff where he didn't need to, the work was so polished. Obviously, still rough compared to later, but compared to a lot of the things that were going on, it was just. Just so far ahead of what had been done. It really helped up the game as far as what you could expect to see in a comic book.
Yeah, these were important comics. At this, again, today comics are the biggest thing going.
Yes.
They were not in 1975, 76, 78.
They were still kid stuff.
It was still kid stuff, but they were establishing the idea that these could be really mature stories.
Yes. Well, and that had started some prior, because especially in the early Marvel age.
Yeah, when it is the story of Marvel to a degree.
Yeah. It's still not. It's still a little bit goofy version of serious stories early on, but it's Stanley starts the movement towards these are real people with real situations with problems.
Yeah,
and that eventually gets you to the point where you're doing a drug story in Spider-Man, and then later in not much longer, but Spider-Man was first. And then you do the drug story in Green Arrow and Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Yeah, and this is the era when they're introducing the idea that somebody's got to control the Avengers.
Yes.
This introduction. I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. is there, but now Perez is part of the group setting up tension between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of who watches the Watchers is being kind of brought into this, and it's
others
really
pick it up and run with it.
Yeah, it's a really important beginning.
Yeah,
and
it's not that he's the sole perpetrator of that, but he's part of the creative team that brings it about.
And he's really important to that era of the Avengers. So now, listeners, as you can imagine, you can probably tell from these episodes, I'm not as much of a comic guy as these two. Now, these two here could write an incredible history of comics. You could.
Well, we probably could.
You could team up and you could write a tome, an encyclopedia history of comics.
And we are not as knowledgeable as many.
No. But we have access to the source material.
Yeah. But I am a huge admirer of George Perez's art. When I was 12 and 13 and reading the Avengers and reading the Fantastic Four,
he stood out.
Yeah, he stood out. He and Byrne were my favorites, and I was disappointed when he had to hand off the Avengers to someone else.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, oh, bummer. Yeah. Perez isn't doing this issue.
Right.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was very upsetting when he's doing the Fantastic Four, and he's got a reprint in 180, and then you got another one later with 189, just within the same year, and then the next issue is a fill-in issue, which is what they call an album issue.
Yeah,
it's basically where they rehash events from the team's history.
Yeah.
And that was done by Sal Buscema. So there's 2 months there he doesn't even do the book. When he's on the Avengers, he's off for 4 issues because he does that 161 and 162 with Ant-Man and Ultron.
And
then they have George Tuska come in and do a fill-in with some Champions characters,
Hercules and
Darkstar and whoever else I forget. Black Widow was in it.
Black Widow and Iceman.
Yes, and then Byrne does the Count Nefaria 3-issue arc.
Yep.
And then he comes back, but even then he doesn't do everyone from that until there's still a fill-in issue in there that Sal Buscema does. So
Shards of Crystal Doom, right? Is that 171?
I believe it's around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's Scarlet Witch kind of finding her place on the team. Ultron.
Well, that's where she really shows that she's more powerful than you think.
That's right. She's the big dog daddy, and that's why Ultron separated her from the team.
Yes.
And Ms. Marvel coming into it. Carol Danvers. So
which was that's kind of funny if you think about it, because Ms. Marvel was an attempt at the quote-unquote feminist book that they brought in and ran for, I think it was 18 issues, and
it's 23.
23, but it just didn't sell that much. They gave it 2 years, really, and it's not they got the.
It was a great book.
It was very good.
Was the writer.
He was. That's right.
And it was great.
But it did not last. It didn't sell. They got this character that we spent all this time and energy creating. Well, we can't let her go. What are we going to do? So, let's put her in the Avengers.
Well, she's got the Marvel name, so they're going to make sure they milk that for one thing.
Yeah.
But so she ends up in the Avengers guest
Carol Danvers is a good character. I mean,
and they recognize that. They just didn't. Her book's gone. What do we do? And that's what they did with it there for a while.
Yes, and then eventually they committed that great sin. How they got rid of her in Avengers 200. It's the one thing that George Perez says he regrets doing on the Avengers.
Yeah.
What? Because he was the artist on that issue. And that's basically where they have a Mortis, who's Kang the Conqueror at a later age, kind of sexually assaults her, kind of makes her love him in limbo, and force her to give birth to himself.
To bring him into our reality.
And then she goes back to limbo with him. Which, well, she wasn't in her right mind.
Very much so.
And they let her go, and nobody said a word.
Yeah, that was just a very... It was a subject that was taboo, but they had no idea what to do. You couldn't... They didn't realize what you could do with,
and you don't realize
with that. Yeah.
How badly that came across until fans were able to get on message boards and discuss it.
Yeah.
And then Chris Claremont, of course, undoes that and talks about how badly the Avengers treated her when she's brought into the X-Men as a sidekick character, supporting cast.
Right, yeah, and they bring a lot of that on too, because you couldn't leave it like that.
Right. Well, she was such a great character, and they got rid of her in such a stupid way. So, anyways, Perez is now at DC. He's done Crisis, and then he basically gets to pick whatever he wants. They've reset and rebooted the universe, the DC universe.
Yeah.
Not all books, but some books are restarting at number 1. Wonder Woman is one of them. He's always had a fondness for Wonder Woman. Perez is known for the women he draws. One of the notes I made prior to the episode was that he draws incredibly sexy women, but he doesn't make them sex objects.
That's right. He doesn't sexualize them. Is it fair?
A feminist would probably say he does because of some of the costumes.
Yeah.
But if it's really the reader who makes them sexual objects, then you might say, well, look at them. Maybe you could make that argument, but they're not treated that way in the script or by the characters unless it's to make a point that somebody's a real sleazebag.
Right.
So,
because all through this, again, Scarlet Witch, Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, Janet Pym, Ms. Marvel, they're treated very equally.
Yes, and that's partially the writer as well as the artist, because the artist could put them in the background. And then how's the writer going to bring that in?
Right.
So, there's very much a cooperation going on.
Right. I mean, those characters are respected by the other characters. Mm-hmm. Iron Man and Cap and Wonder Man trying to impress her. Miss Marvel, well, I'm almost as strong as Thor.
Yeah.
But not quite.
So, he takes on Wonder Woman and resets that book. And that quickly catapults him into an even higher level because he's writing and drawing this one.
Yeah.
And he does that one for a few years. We'll get to that in just a second. And so he's on that for a really long time. And I think he ends up ultimately leaving DC again because of editorial interference. He's doing War of the Gods, and there's a lot of interference there. And then he's on Infinity Gauntlet with Jim Starlin as the writer. He's one I could have picked for as the fifth with this because he comes along at this time too, and also is a great visual storyteller. And so he's ends up not being able to finish either one of those. And then he kind of bounces around doing some independent projects and what have you before he makes a really triumphant return to Marvel in another return to the Avengers, which is probably a good point for a bourbon break.
Yes.
Indeed.
So, Francis, you've been quiet over there for a little bit.
Well, I am drinking. When we started this here episode, Robert had made the comment to us earlier. I've got a teensy little bit in like 4 of these bottles of bourbon here. Help me, please. Finish them off so I can go buy new.
He has an excuse to go replace them.
To replace them. So we have done our duty with regards to this.
We've not drunk any more bourbon than we normally would. We've just been focusing it in different areas. So
exactly. So we've been taking... I pulled the last of your Jim Beam Black.
Now, you did this neat. No ice?
No ice.
That's one I think you got to have ice to really...
Well, yeah. At
really
this
bring it out.
Perhaps, but it's kind of done, at this point. So
we can always go get you an ice cube.
No, I don't think it's got a bite.
I think it's a little too medicinal without the ice. Because the ice really explodes the flavor to me.
It's and there's maybe some truth to that, but it's definitely a mouth bourbon. It works through there. It's not, and which is I like that. I like the upper stimulation on the upper side, not the bottom side.
Right.
And it pretty much stays there. It's with the tongue. It's with the back of the throat and the mouth and all that stuff. It's not so much the sinuses, not so much the esophagus, but it's a
right. Well, if you keep it in the mouth, that's where you really get the maximum flavor.
Well, that's why I like it. It has been a very, very long time since I had this. Probably when we cracked it. Hadn't had it since then. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do my duty here and finish it off for you.
I appreciate that. So, Martin, what are you drinking?
I poured some of your Knob Creek 9-year-old to try to get you closer to having that.
And that's a really good one.
You can't beat Knob Creek.
Knob Creek is definitely
that's a top notch,
a king, a leader in the marketplace.
Yes, and a 9-year bottle. That's some real aging.
Very mellow, very smooth, very nice maple caramel notes to it. Good stuff. Different from the last ones I've had that were spicier. This one's more of a sweetie, caramel, maple syrup type flavor.
Right.
It's good.
Right. And so, did you finish that? Because
I don't think I got the last pull, but I was trying to help you out there and get it down.
Because I was thinking I pulled that, and I thought I said I left enough in the Knob Creek.
I poured before you.
Okay, that's what it was. You poured. You went. That's why. So there's probably just enough left for one more pull out of that.
Because I've got the little wet fast.
One.
Finish it off, Mr. Creosote.
So I've got the same, the Knob Creek 9-year. Again, because I want to do a really good quality bourbon for when we toast George at the end of the episode.
Absolutely.
Because we definitely will do that. Oh, that's so good. Again, so smooth. You get a lot of this in the mouth as well, which I really like.
Yeah, keep it on your tongue. Keep it going.
Yeah.
Stop drinking soft drinks so you can really taste them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes, I am now into, we're into April, so we're coming up on 7 months for me.
Yeah. I'm kind of occasionally still having one, but, trying to stick water, unsweet tea, black coffee, and trying to get my taste buds back. And, just the coffee this morning at Biscuit Belly, I think it's Heine Brothers. Oh, man, it was just so rich and wonderful.
Yeah.
Just a great flavor to it. Loved it. Didn't put anything in it. Nice and black and bitter like my insides.
I knew we were going there. I was
I'm really finding that lessening my sugar intake not only is good for me, but I feel like I can taste things.
Right.
I
still have a lot of sweet to drink, so I don't know that my palate has returned quite to the level of yours. But I do think I am picking up things more.
I think you are too.
Because it's not a quick thing. So it's harder to say, oh yes, absolutely. But when you start thinking about, oh yeah, I'm commenting on more flavors that I'm tasting. So yeah, I'm definitely starting to pick that up.
Last time we talked about wild turkey.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, not an expensive bourbon, but the pears and vanilla and that stuff came through, and I was like, wow, I can taste what they say it's supposed to taste like on the label. I went right out and bought a bottle.
That's right.
And I got a bottle of wild turkey stash for next time we're at Studio M.
Yes, I when I go to replace some of the bottles we have emptied, I plan on getting a bottle of wild turkey and a bottle of the double oaked, because I've not owned a bottle of double oaked in a while. I've been out for some time.
That Russell Reserve too is also a very good one too.
It's the same. It's the same group, which we've used that before. We've had that here.
I wouldn't mind picking up a bottle of Michter's too. I really enjoyed that.
It's good stuff.
That was good stuff. So, anyways, so back to Perez. This pause here. So this is taking us up to about 96, 97. So Perez would have been in the industry for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's an incredibly long time. Now think about this. All the great work that he did, and it seems like a lot, but really, it's not in terms of sheer number of issues, because he wasn't as regular. Although at DC he got much better. But his early years. That's about the same amount of time that Kirby had been working by the time he started the Fantastic Four.
No.
Kirby had been working from 41 to 61. And, Perez had been working from the early 70s to the mid-70s. Probably this is a little bit more. It's like 22, 23 years for Perez. And and then when you compare what Kirby had done, the sheer output, because he was cranking them out all through the 40s and 50s. Well, except when he was gone for
the
war.
That's right, yeah.
But he cranked out stuff in the 50s like crazy, and continued into the 60s. So he's at the same age basically, and when he comes back to the Avengers. And he does that with Kurt Busiek. And that is probably his magnum opus, for lack of a better phrase, lack of a better term. He does 3 years on this with Kurt Busiek, and some of the best work he's ever done visually as well as the storytelling. Because I think he and Busiek are co-plotting, if not officially, certainly unofficially, because of the way Marvel Method works. And it's just some phenomenal stuff.
Ultron, we would have words with thee.
Yes.
I believe that comes through that period.
Yes,
very famous
some
quotation.
Great Ultron works, and it takes Ultron even farther than he's ever gone. He literally destroys a country, annihilates everybody in it.
Yeah.
There's some new characters introduced. Visually very good. I don't know if they were really all that successful as characters. Not really.
Changes Scarlet Witch's outfit too, if I remember right.
Yes, she starts to wear
I seem to recall.
She starts to wear the gypsy outfit.
Right.
Now the thing that he said about her, because this is again Perez, I always drew Wanda in this particular outfit as if she wasn't wearing any underwear, which of course makes all of the nerds reading that just heads explode.
Yeah.
But if you look at the costume, no, there's no way she was wearing underwear because of the way, if you look at it. Which, when you're reading the story, you don't really think about that because they're wearing such skimpy costumes anyways on the women. But, he did like his voluptuous women.
His mastery of drawing the female form was often unmatched.
Yes.
That was one of his great. That's why he was so good on Wonder Woman. Because he was able to bring that nuance and that subtlety and that beauty and that strength and all those things that need to go into that character were able to be visually displayed so effectively because of his unique talents.
Yes. And he could draw truly beautiful women.
That's correct.
Not generic-faced women with big boobs and a big butt. Like some artists are known to do.
We didn't say the names.
We won't say the names. Because at least those artists can draw feet. Rob Liefeld.
See, I knew you were going there.
I mean, he's a nice enough guy, but, I will never tire of ragging out. And a lot of people don't. He kind of laughs at it himself.
Yeah.
So, which, for the amount of money he's made, I would be able to laugh at myself, too, for that. No big deal. So, he comes back and does that, and he kind of hops back and forth with some creator-owned projects, and kind of works, I don't want to say sporadically, but he's in the public eye not quite as much after he's done with the Avengers. I know he did some writing and some inking on Superman when it was relaunched with the New 52. He left that because, again, couldn't stand the editorial crap because they couldn't tell him where the character was going because he was writing modern time, contemporaneous with all the rest of the books.
Right.
Whereas the Action Comics book was when Superman first started. But they wouldn't tell him what was going on there ahead of time so he didn't conflict with
anything. It was all
anything.
Grant Morrison at the time. Yeah.
And he didn't tell anybody what he was planning. So it was very easily he could have, they could have
collaborated.
They could collaborate, but easily Perez could have written something that would invalidate something the other guy did. Whereas Morrison could never invalidate something that Perez did because his stuff came first.
No, yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So,
eventually, Morrison's whole his whole literal reboot of the character was cast into the outer darkness.
Yeah.
They basically just mixoplicked it, if you can use that as a word, to try and, let's bring back the guy that we dumped earlier, but we'll do it in a way that, maybe it won't invalidate, we'll just put them together, and he's dead, but we'll...
Yeah, let's not even get into that.
That's right.
So,
dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
So Perez does a lot of fan work. He's doing the conventions constantly. Does a lot of independent projects. In the 90s he did several iRobots, Isaac Asimov's iRobots. He didn't stick with that because he wasn't all that... just couldn't get interested in it. But he's doing a lot. You just have to really be on the eye out, keep an eye out for it to be able to find it. Because he wasn't necessarily always at one of the big two companies.
Yeah, and sometimes he's doing independent stuff that, maybe you got it, maybe you didn't.
Right. I did a lot of work with Malibu comics before they kind of imploded. Marvel bought the characters and then didn't do anything with them, which really sucked because Malibu did some really good stuff.
So, sir, you've got some books by your side there about Perez. Talk about those just a little bit.
So,
give people what can you pick up to get an idea of Perez's artwork? So,
if you want to really get into his artwork, the one thing we didn't mention was the Avengers Jla Crossover.
Oh yes, that's right. He did.
Now this is what he would probably consider his magnum opus. He was originally going to do this in the '80s when it was agreed to. Then the companies couldn't agree on stuff after they'd agreed to stuff, and the project was shelved. He had drawn 21 pages, or 23, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work, especially for somebody like Perez who does such detailed pencils. So he finally gets to do it. He does it with Kurt Busiek. So he gets to do the Avengers and JLA together. And there's this great picture. If you search online, you probably find it of Superman holding Mjolnir and Cap's shield.
Right. Yeah.
And it's leading up to that, it's just a really great sequence. And again, the visuals are just phenomenal because he's just that good.
Yeah.
And like I said, he does some other stuff.
He drew people at action very well.
Yes. He was a great. Or is was because he doesn't do it anymore. He retired a couple of years ago because he had heart issues. Now, of course, the cancer.
Yeah.
So, any JLA Avengers, any of the Avengers or other reprints of his are just great to do.
Yeah, many of them have been collected.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So they're available in that format. So, in the beautiful printing.
Logan's Run was one of the early books that he had done.
Oh, I'd forgotten that one. Yeah, that's right around the time the movie came out.
Yes, so that's
you're talking 70s.
Yeah, that's when he's doing Creatures on the Loose.
Yeah.
Around that time, and he's like I said, he had a bunch of independent projects. Peter David was one of his favorite. He was one of Peter David's favorite collaborators. They did Hulk Future Imperfect.
Yep.
Which was really great.
Peter David is an awesome writer.
And something called Sex and Violence.
I remember that.
Which is a play on sex and violence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the book was about.
Yeah.
And that's another great one if you want to pick it up. It was an epic book, and it was just really, really good stuff. Not superhero. It was more action-oriented, but it played on the relationship between sex and violence in media. So again, those are two great things. So this book that I'm first looking at is called George Perez, Storyteller. And this is just a great overview of the artwork that he had done over the years and the various things. You get lots of pictures. Lots and lots of pictures. Which is what you want with a character like this. And the text is all about the story. Or the stories about all the stories that he had done. And he's just, again, it's a great overview. It's about $30, and it's really just an afternoon's worth of looking at stuff.
Cool.
Now, the next big book, I forget what I paid for, but I don't think I paid retail. I think I bought it on sale somewhere. Is called The Art of George Perez. This is published by IDW. And this is a much thicker book. It's $49.99. This is like a coffee table art book. Yeah. Is the size and format that we're looking at. And this is literally, decade by decade, samples of the art. Actual pages of the art. Not a whole lot of text. There's a lot of, there may be some explanatory pieces. There's some paragraphs alongside it, but every page has art on it.
Most of it's finished. Some of it's pencils only. It depends on what you're looking at.
So, it really, if I'd gone through this, I probably would have been better off using this as the guide for what he did when.
Well, yeah, because he did, we picked the big highlights, but there's many other, onesies here, onesies there.
Oh, yeah, because we didn't talk about the Marvel Fanfare Black Widow 4-issue thing.
He did that.
Great.
He did the cover of the first DC Star Trek, which I love that series.
Yes, he did.
Which was really, really good. That was it was well written by somebody who understood the franchise. And of course, it was just he touched so many things at so many times, and you'd never know where one of his covers might pop up too. Those would happen more and more as time went on. Yes, the famous picture there, which is shame this is an audio only podcast, showing a tattered, battered Superman holding Mjolnir and Captain America's shield.
Which actually has some cracks and divots. Which I'm not really a fan when they did it, because the first time they did that, it was, oh my god.
Yeah.
And now it happens
too often. I'm thinking, well, either it is or it ain't,
So, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that, if I went through all of it, I probably wouldn't even realize, oh my god, he did that?
Yeah.
Because, for a while I wasn't buying anyway, so I missed a lot of the stuff that he did during those times. And, which is unfortunate, but, he did a lot of stuff for different things. He used to do art pieces for some theater stuff I think his wife was involved in. Mm-hmm. If I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong about some of that, but there are several pieces for theater posters and what have you that are in here. Again, if you just want to look at some beautiful art, this is a great $50 buy. And you can probably find this on sale somewhere. It is a really good
because
thing.
It is so very, very good. And Perez, in many respects, he was complimented by inkers that worked really well with him, but I still think he's best when he inks himself.
He doesn't really ink himself that often.
I know, and I just...
That's partially because he's too slow.
Well, exactly. And that's why when you get things that he's taken his time with, like the JLA that you have, and a few of those, or his covers are the best ones, because he takes his time with his covers. And the Marvel Fanfare with the Black Widow, that's unbelievably good.
Yeah, and that's a very simple cover.
Very much so. I'm talking about the second one he did.
Oh, the second one, yeah.
The one with she's in the sewers.
Yeah.
It's enormously detailed. And it is really just a fantastic way of doing that. And of course, his Justice League was phenomenal. Some of those were just stunning. We could go on and on about how he's done just about everything at different times. Like I say, a few Green Lantern covers here. When he's doing DC, he's doing DC. I mean, when he was doing Marvel, he was doing Marvel. I mean,
he didn't really do a whole lot of. He was at one or the other mostly. He's not
right. He's doing some stuff. With John Carter, Warlord of Mars. He did the Beatlemania stuff that the Marvel Super Special did, which is that's a one-off that was weird. Yeah, very, very weird.
In addition to those two books, I just gave Martin, handed to him, didn't give to him, Modern Masters, Volume 2, which is all on George Perez. It's similar to the Art of George Perez, the George Perez Storyteller book, in that there's a lot of samples of his work and an analysis, interviews, stuff like that. And then there's another one, again, these two, Modern Masters, a little bit older, but the oldest one from Fantagraphic Books, which is no longer even an entity, I think, Focus on George Perez. And this is something that was published, I think, right in the early 90s at the latest. And it's, again, same kind of thing, discussion about the work that he's done and pictures of what he's done. And, if you're into comics and the history, these last three books, the Storyteller, the Art of, and Focus, or not the Art of, Modern Masters, and the Focus on, are great for getting a little bit of the history of the period that he worked in, whereas Storyteller is just strictly eye candy. And it's some fantastic eye candy. And if it were real candy, you'd have to get dentures by the time you were done. Because it's that sweet.
The man is truly one of the greatest of us.
Yes. I tried to draw like Perez many times.
He's just... there's a natural. You can if you know very much about comic book art, you recognize his work very quickly.
Oh yes.
Once you've seen it, it's very recognizable, and it's in lots and lots of places.
Right, like somebody like a Byrne and Adam. That's why one of the reasons why I picked those four. All four of them have a very recognizable style, just like Jim Starlin would be a good fifth.
Yeah,
for
absolutely,
that, because again, a very recognizable style. The one thing you can always recognize about Jim Starlin stuff is his big baddie is a big, beefy character,
right?
The High Lord Papal or Thanos.
That's right.
Although Thanos, when he first appeared, was not a big, beefy character.
Yeah, that kind of evolved.
That evolved
on there,
but all of his robots look alike as well.
That's true. I had forgotten about that.
Which is kind of funny. A lot of Burns robots look alike too.
They do. Which is great for the Doombots. I'm telling you.
Well, no, I mean the Doombots are kind of already established.
I know,
but the ones that when you see a Byrne robot in some story. They've got very similar features. They look a lot like the Raj 2000, which is his first creator-owned character. And like I said, it's just the man. It's a shame that he could not have had a longer, fuller career. Same is true for all of these.
Well,
guys.
that's correct. We mourn the fact that they left when they did because they could have stayed on a few more years and done some really great stuff.
Well, Perez had to stop doing a lot of work because of health issues originally. Sure. He had a problem with one of his eyes. He nearly went blind in it. Had a heart attack. So these last 10 years has really been hard for him to do a lot of work. He's mostly been doing convention sketches and
commissions,
appearances.
They do stuff like that.
Byrne has not done anything regular for pay except commissions in quite some time. He had done Star Trek. What was it? The picture book that he did. New Visions. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
Where you take pictures of from episodes and put new captions, rearrange them into new stories.
I've forgotten though. Yeah.
And he said that was scratching the creative itch for him for a while. But then he started a fan fiction, X-Men Elsewhen. He's done a little over 30 issues worth. But he's now apparently got some issues of his own health-wise.
Right.
He's 71. He'll be 72 later this year, 2 days after me.
He's still one of the greatest.
Absolutely. So, and of course, Simonson is pretty much retired. I don't think he's done a whole lot of new stuff since he finished his Norseman, is what I think it was, or Ragnarok. It might have been both. He had done a new take on the Norse mythology,
which is still very much in the ascendancy.
Which is his thing. That's all. He's always had that thing even before he started work at Marvel on Thor.
Right. Which in many respects redefined the character.
Oh yes. And of course, Starlin. He's just doing some independent stuff. He just did a new book on Dreadstar.
I was going to say Dreadstar is one of his crowning achievements, and I wish it was more readily available because, and I read your copies many years ago, and found it to be one of the great. In fact, it pained me when he ended it because he did. He had everything ends in the way that worked. It was phenomenal. It was one of his. It was truly one of the because he was doing it himself, and you can tell when these creative geniuses like these guys are given the rein to do what they want, they got it.
Yeah,
and all of these guys that you just mentioned, they're excellent writers too.
Yes,
they've all written for their own art. And so, Byrne was writing and drawing. The Fantastic Four.
Well, from Fantastic Four on, he almost never had another writer. He did a couple of projects where other people wrote. Neil Adams, he was in and out of comics. I don't know what else he was doing, fine art or commercial art, when he wasn't actively doing comics, but he recently had returned doing some Batman and some other things.
Stuff,
He did a Fantastic Four miniseries recently. So he's been involved. He's 80.
Yeah, and doesn't look it. And he does regular on the convention circuit.
He's 81, 82, something like that. So
he's truly one of the great geniuses that we. It was kind of like Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood does not star in a movie that he doesn't direct anymore. Hasn't for years.
Right.
And kind of these guys are the same way. I'm Neil Adams. I'll do it my way, and you'll sell a lot of books if you let me.
Yeah. Well, and all three of them got really. Walt Simonson, he did that to a large extent as well, but I think he was also very comfortable doing whatever. I'm not sure what else he has done, but he hasn't done as much as I would like to have seen in recent years.
Well, we can all wish for much more content from these guys, but
and also they are getting to the age where they would retire.
Well, that's right, and that's kind of like they're the second generation. Roy Thomas in the writer's side is kind of the same way. Because he was Stan Lee's basically picked successor that ushered in that Bronze Age for Marvel. And I was reading an article just before we finished this up that he still does the convention circuit. Roy Thomas does a lot, and he recently signed. I think it was for 8 hours. It was like in the tens of thousands of books for people.
Wow.
It's unbelievable that he would do that. I cannot imagine how he could do that physically. But it's like 8 or 10 hours straight of signing books. And these are in the 10. I forget the number. I want to say it's like 80,000, but it's huge.
That's phenomenal.
I know.
It's one of the things I really regret about not having just done it early on. Because there were stories going around that Kirby, if you just showed up at his house, give you a sandwich, talk about his art, and send you on his way. Send you on your way.
That's right. Yeah.
But he would never turn away
a fan.
So I never got to see him, but when we were in college, we should have road tripped out to California one year.
Well, yeah,
one
because
summer.
he died in 1994. We were of the age that
We could have done
we could have
it.
done
We could
that.
have done it.
Yeah.
Right. We could have done
Got to meet Byrne.
And you've met him several times.
A couple of times. Got to meet Neil Adams and chat with him a couple of times here in town.
Mike Grell's another one who's
Mike
who was
Grell, I
right
got
around
to
that
talk
same
with.
time.
Got to meet
Fantastic fellow, yes. I love
Jim
all his
Starlin.
work.
Loved talking to him. Spent a lot of time talking to Jim Shooter at one convention, and that was fascinating.
Yeah, he's got a very unique take because so
Yes.
many of the books we were buying when we were really, into this as it was so formational to us, he was the one that was in charge about the decisions that were made one way or the other. And I've always wanted to ask him, why did you do this? Or, why did you let them do this? Or what was the...
Or why did you make them do this? Because there's a lot of that later on at the end.
Right.
He was a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, or question is, why did you see the need? I want to kind of get into what purpose did that serve? Or why were you trying to do?
He's one we could do an episode on.
Shooter?
His
Absolutely,
history. But at some point, I would like to do a Byrne episode and some others.
We will make this a regular, reoccurring mini-series.
Because these guys are seminal influences for me artistically.
Very much so, yeah, that's right.
They influence where we are with the films.
Oh, yeah.
Very strongly.
Very much
the casual fan won't know that, but the look of and these stories and these characters
it's
are very influential from this Bronze Age.
Kirby obviously is the prime source material, but you're going to see a fair amount of Simonson stuff in some of the Thor movies.
Very much so.
You're going to see some of the Perez stuff, though not as much from his later stuff, but you're going to see some of that in the Avengers movies. And, it's just, of course, Starlin, that's all. The Infinity Gauntlet, that's all him.
That's right.
All that source material came from him. So these guys are just phenomenal. And when they do pass, which will be all too soon,
we shall toast them.
We shall toast them again, but it will be a very sad day. Since we are talking about Perez, a toast to Perez.
Toast to George. That's right.
I pray for a miraculous recovery, but if not, a peaceful passing.
Amen to that.
Please know, I think he would know about the fans, but he's got a ton of fans, and here's 3 fans.
Three fans sitting here right now.
We want to make this part of posterity.
Yeah,
because the internet's forever. And
that's right. The internet is forever.
So,
he's one of the ones I regret not being able to see in person. Because he doesn't do conventions anymore.
Yeah, would have been awesome.
Yeah. So to George.
All right.
So Francis, what's next?
We're going back to history again, guys. We talked about the Peace of Westphalia. Now we're going to talk about the Peace of Versailles next. So there's a lot, and we're talking about Napoleon, the end.
Right.
Of
This
all
is
that.
The early 1800s.
Early 1800s. That's right. Exactly. Where did all that go, and what transpired between the two, and how that set up the future that would come even 100 years later. So lots of great discussion on the history side. Next episode, folks. Don't miss it.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.